moment they no longer need you is the moment they forget you ever mattered.
Power rarely announces itself. It doesn't always arrive with drums or blood or gold. Sometimes real power walks quietly into a room and becomes the thing no one can move without. If they rely on you, you stay. If they don't, you vanish. It's that simple. To maintain your independence, Robert Greene wrote, you must always be needed and wanted. The more you are relied upon, the more freedom you have. It's a hard law, a cold one. But like all the laws in this world, it works. If you become a luxury, you're replaceable. If you become a need, you're untouchable. The art of making yourself essential. We talk a lot about independence. We're taught to chase it, claim it, build walls around it. But those who rise the highest understand the truth. Independence is a myth. Everybody needs something. The question is, who do they need it from? The real game is played beneath the surface. It's not about having all the power. It's about being the one no one can live without. A king has gold, armies, 1,000 flatterers. But it's the quiet advisor at his side who knows how to calm his rage. It's the nurse who understands how to stop his shaking hands. It's the one man in the room who dares to say, no. That's where the real control lives, not in strength, but in necessity. 1. Make yourself irreplaceable. People don't stay close out of love, not always. They stay because without you, things fall apart. You don't have to be the strongest. You don't even have to be the best. You just have to be the only one who can do what you do. Maybe you know something no one else does. Maybe you solve problems in a way no one else can. Or maybe you're the only one who listens when they speak. Whatever it is, hold on to it. That's your power. That's what keeps your seat at the table, even when others want to see you gone. Be the one thing they can't remove, without breaking everything else in the process. 2. The quiet trap of emotional need. There's another kind of dependency, softer, stranger, more dangerous. The kind that lives in emotion. It starts small. You comfort them when they're uncertain. You make them feel seen when they're invisible. You become the voice they hear in their head when they don't know what to do. And then, one day, they realize they don't know who they are without you. That's how the truly powerful hold people, not with chains, but with silence. They give just enough warmth to keep you close, but never enough to feel whole. And when they disappear, even for a moment, it hurts. The best cages don't even look like cages. They feel like home, until the door won't open. 3. Don't give everything away. There's a mistake people make, especially when they're kind or skilled or want to be liked. They give too much. They teach everything they know. They fix every mistake. They give all the answers. But once people have what they need from you, they move on. You've trained them to live without you. The masters of power, the old ones, the dangerous ones, never do that. They always keep something back, a secret, a technique, a single missing step in the recipe. They give just enough to seem generous, but never enough to be replaceable. Keep the final piece in your hands. That's how you stay in the game, even when others think they've won. This is how power works in quiet rooms, not with shouting, not with swords, but with subtle dependence, the kind that builds slowly, then never lets go. She didn't conquer with armies. She didn't threaten. She didn't plead. She offered beauty, comfort, mystery, and then she took away your will. Circe, the sorceress who mastered the art of making men forget they ever had a choice. They say she lived alone. A woman, somewhere on the edge of the world, not quite mortal, not quite divine, tending to her garden of herbs and monsters on a forgotten island, where the waves broke like whispers and the sun never fully set. Her name was Circe, daughter of Helios, niece to the Titans, blood of the gods, but they never welcomed her at their tables. To Olympus, she was too strange, too soft, too human in her silences. She watched the world from afar, from the sea cliffs of Aea, as men built cities and tore them down, as kings crowned themselves and sent their sons to die. She watched the gods hand out blessings like blades, and the mortals below worship them, only to be left with smoke. Circe understood early what most never learn. To survive, you must be needed, or you must disappear. There is no third option. The world does not remember the gentle. It remembers what it cannot replace. They never taught her. The gods did not pass down spells to daughters they did not love. So she watched the natural world instead. How a single petal could bring sleep. How a root could open a man's chest like a confession. She learned to crush bark with her teeth, to boil loneliness into potions, to pour heartbreak into wine. But above all, she studied the nature of men, not their strength, which was fragile, or their ambition, which was childish, but their need. She noticed that they grew louder the more afraid they were, that they called women witches when those women held power they could not steal or explain. She noticed that their hunger was rarely for flesh. It was for comfort, for admiration, for rest. And so, when men came to her island, she gave them all of it: warmth, food, laughter. She looked into their eyes and saw the boys they had once been, the ones who just wanted someone to listen. She gave and gave until they forgot what they'd come for. And then she took. This is the part that no one tells, right? She did not turn men into pigs because she hated them. She turned them into pigs because that's what they were the moment they stopped needing her. Because without that dependency, without the tension of longing, without the ache of, I don't know how to live without her, they turned cruel. They reached for their swords. They spat on the floor she cleaned. They called her a monster and demanded more. Circe had seen enough to know. Power given freely is never respected. So she cast the spell, not to punish, but to remind them what they truly were when their masks slipped. Not lovers, not warriors, just animals who wanted to consume without cost. And then came the clever one, the one with eyes like knives, Odysseus. He did not charge her halls with hunger. He approached slowly, suspicious, alert, ready to strike if the wind moved wrong. He was not like the others, and that terrified her, because she knew how to handle greed. She knew how to handle desire. But a man who would not need her, who wanted control more than comfort, that was the most dangerous thing of all. And so, for the first time in her long life, Circe did not brew a potion. She did not lay a trap. She did not speak a spell. She did something far riskier. She let him see her, not the witch, not the goddess, not the seductress in silk robes, but the woman who had been alone for too long, who had held too many strangers close, who had forgotten what it felt like to be touched without being feared. She offered him her honesty, and in doing so, she made herself indispensable. He stayed for a year, not because he was trapped, not because of magic, not because she begged. He stayed because she created a life so rich, so warm, so deep, that to leave it would feel like pulling his soul out by the root. She didn't command him. She didn't promise him glory. She simply made herself the only place he could breathe. And that is the essence of Law 11. Don't make them fear you. Make them miss you. Don't chain them to your side. Make your absence unbearable. The real spell was not the one that turned men into animals. It was the one that made them feel safe, and then reminded them that safety too could vanish. Circe's genius was not her magic. It was her understanding of how fragile men truly are. That beneath the armor and the names and the kingdoms, there is a deep, aching hunger to feel cared for, but not owned. So she gave care, with limits. She gave love, with edges. She became not a woman they wanted, but a home they could not rebuild without her. And as Odysseus finally left her shore, with the weight of longing pressed into his chest like a curse, she did not cry, because she knew he would carry her in his mind for the rest of his life, and that was the only power that ever mattered. There are men who rise to power because they inherit it, and then there are men who rise because they make themselves so essential, so entangled in the machinery of the state, so woven into every plan, every secret, every silence, that removing them would be like pulling the spine from a body and expecting it to keep walking. Armand Jean Duplessis, better known to history as Cardinal Richelieu, was one of those men. He wore red, yes, the crimson robe of a churchman, but make no mistake, he was no priest of peace. He was an architect of influence, a master of manipulation, a shadow in human form, and for nearly 2 decades, he held France in his hands like a wine glass, turning it slowly, never spilling a drop. When Richelieu first stepped into the court of Louis XIII, France was not the France we know today. It was scattered, fragmented, a chessboard ruled by noble families, each with their own armies, their own ambitions, their own small poisonous plots. The king was a boy drowning in silk, intelligent, yes, but uncertain, easily overwhelmed. And around him, the vultures circled, dukes, cardinals, foreign spies, each whispering that they alone knew how to hold the realm together. Enter Richelieu, not with fanfare, not with blood, but with patience. He did not try to seize power. He made himself useful, and in that subtle move, that choice to become needed rather than loud, he began his slow, merciless ascent. Richelieu never begged for trust. He didn't flatter the king with empty compliments. He gave him something better, clarity. When Louis hesitated, Richelieu spoke plainly. When the court argued, he listened longer than anyone, then offered a solution so precise, so carefully measured, that even his enemies found themselves nodding. He didn't try to be irreplaceable by force. He became irreplaceable through utility. Whenever chaos stirred, the king found himself asking, "Where is Richelieu?" And that is the moment dependency is born. When your absence causes more fear than your presence ever could. Richelieu did not need to sit on the throne. He simply made sure the throne could not stand without him. He played France like a pipe organ, pressing different keys at different times to make the whole room sing the tune he wanted. To the nobles, he extended small favors and kept detailed records of every debt. To the king, he offered loyalty and quietly trimmed the power of anyone else who got too close. He dismantled the Huguenot strongholds, weakened the independent cities, disarmed the nobles who once rode freely with their own militias, not with swords, but with laws, with rules, restrictions, taxes, oaths. He did not need to crush his enemies outright. He simply made them need the state to survive. And since he was the state's beating heart, they served him in order to protect themselves. Perhaps Richelieu's greatest genius was knowing when to say nothing. There are stories, never fully proven of course, that he had secret files on nearly every member of the court, lovers, bribes, conspiracies. He rarely used them directly, but he let people know, subtly, that he knew. He would pour wine, lean in close, smile faintly, and in that silence, entire careers crumbled. Power, after all, isn't always in what you say. Sometimes it's in what you don't say, and in what they fear you might. Louis XIII was not a fool. He knew Richelieu was growing too powerful. He knew his minister had enemies, and that his own nobles resented being ruled by a cardinal. Several times the king considered removing him, but each time he paused. Because with Richelieu gone, what then? Who would understand the tangled alliances with Spain and Austria? Who would keep the nobles from tearing each other apart? Who would manage the secrets, the spies, the balance of courtly favors? In the end, Louis stayed loyal to Richelieu, not because he loved him, but because he needed him. And that kind of bond, forged in necessity, not affection, is the most unbreakable of all. In one of his final moves, Richelieu helped establish the absolute monarchy, not because he wanted to be king, but because he wanted to control the king without ever needing the crown. He didn't want the spotlight. He wanted the levers behind the curtain. He made himself the ghost in every room, the name whispered before decisions were made, the mind others tried to predict, but never fully understood. Richelieu died in 1642, but his design outlived him. The structure he built, where the king ruled, but the court served quietly beneath the weight of unspoken dependencies, that became the blueprint for all who followed. He taught the world that power does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears robes. Sometimes it stands in the shadows. And sometimes it simply waits until no one can move without its permission. He never needed to rule from the front. He simply made sure that no one could rule. Before there was thunder, before the hammer, before the halls of Asgard shone with the light of glory and conquest, there was laughter. Not the kind shared between friends, not the kind that follows a joke. This laughter was something else, sharper, colder, older. The laughter of someone who knew the end of the story long before the heroes had begun reading their lines. His name was Loki, the god of mischief, the trickster, the necessary evil. And if Circe mastered dependence through desire, if Richelieu ruled through precision and patience, then Loki mastered it through chaos. Because sometimes, the most powerful position in any system is not the throne, but the fault line beneath it. From the moment Loki entered the halls of the gods, he was different. Not by blood. He wasn't born of Asgard. He was a frost giant's child, raised in the Golden Kingdom as a gesture of peace, a symbol of unity between old enemies. But symbols are only beautiful at a distance. Up close, they bleed. Loki was clever, faster than the others, always thinking 3 steps ahead. He wasn't the strongest, far from it. But strength bored him anyway. He preferred secrets, masks, the uncomfortable truth behind beautiful lies. He knew he would never be truly loved in Asgard, so instead, he made himself indispensable. Loki wasn't just the god of mischief, he was the fixer. Whenever the gods found themselves in traps they couldn't escape, whenever their pride led them too far, whenever a war teetered on the edge of disaster, they turned to him. Because he always had a way out. Sometimes it cost them. Sometimes it humiliated them. Sometimes it required bending the very rules of the universe. But it worked. He saved Thor's hammer. He negotiated with dwarves, stole from giants, tricked monsters. He repaired what no one else could, because he could see through the illusions everyone else was living inside. He was not admired. He was not trusted. But when the fire broke out, he was the first name they called. That is dependence at its most twisted form. Not affection, not respect, but the knowledge that without him, everything would fall apart. Loki understood something Richelieu and Circe never had to face. Dependence creates resentment. The more they needed him, the more they hated him for it. Every time he saved them, they remembered that they couldn't save themselves. And in their eyes, that made him dangerous. They called him liar, snake, betrayer. But still, they came back, again and again, because Loki offered what no one else could. Answers wrapped in riddles, salvation hidden inside chaos. And each time he returned, his grin grew wider. Because he knew, the more they hated him, the more they proved how much they needed him. What makes Loki tragic is not his mischief, it's his awareness. He knew they would never see him as equal. He knew he would never sit beside Thor at the feasting tables, never have his name carved in stone as a hero. So he played the role they gave him, and in doing so, he made himself so tightly wound into their world that removing him would be like yanking a thread from a spider's web. He became the chaos their order required, the shadow to their light, the whisper behind their thunder. Even when he tore things apart, he was still building something, a deeper kind of control, because in every catastrophe he caused, there was a lesson. And in every lesson, the gods came crawling back. There's always a limit. No matter how valuable you are, eventually, if people feel powerless in your presence for too long, they'll turn. Not because you wronged them, but because you reminded them of their weakness. And so, one day, Loki went too far. He orchestrated a death, one that cut too deep. Not a prank, not a fixable wound. A death the gods could not ignore. They bound him, with chains made from the entrails of his own son. They buried him beneath the earth, with venom dripping on his face, his screams echoing into darkness for all time. But here's the part no one likes to say out loud. Even then, as he rotted in silence beneath the world, the gods missed him, because no one else could do what he did. No one else understood the balance like he did. No one else was both the poison and the antidote, and without him, the cracks in their golden world began to spread. Loki teaches us something terrifying and true. You can be hated, mocked, punished, exiled, and still be needed. You can be the villain in their stories, and the reason those stories still make sense. He was never trusted, but he was always invited back, because he made himself a part of the system they built to exclude him. Because he made himself useful, even when they didn't want him to be. Because he made himself the one thing they could never fully remove. They called me a monster, he might have said, but they always needed the monster to protect them from the world they couldn't understand. It is not about controlling others with threats or shackles. It is about becoming so embedded in their lives, so necessary to their progress, comfort, or survival, that the idea of cutting you out feels like cutting off a limb. And the most dangerous part, they may never realize it until it's too late. Here's how to build that kind of power. The world is full of people who point out problems. Far fewer solve them. Your job is not to be loud. Your job is to be the one person who knows how to keep things running. Whether it's your partner's emotional world, your boss's overcomplicated workflow, your friend's inability to move forward, find the thing they always struggle with and solve it. But here's the key. Don't solve it completely. Do just enough to keep the wheel turning, but not enough for them to stop needing you. A mechanic is only paid while the machine still breaks. Fix it too well and they'll never come back. Leave a thread. Hold back the final step. Let your value live in the recurrence of the need. This is what Circe mastered. She didn't just offer pleasure. She became the only place where it existed. When people crave something they can't find anywhere else, A feeling, a skill, an answer, an experience. They keep coming back. Not because they like you even, but because their mind has anchored that need to you. Ask yourself, what do you give them that no one else does? Maybe it's the way you help them think. Maybe it's emotional safety. Maybe it's clarity, or chaos, or quiet. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's yours alone. If they want it, they have to return to your door. People respect boundaries, even if they complain about them. When you give too much, when you offer all your time, all your energy, all your expertise, they use it, but they don't value it. What makes something valuable is its scarcity. This is Richelieu's greatest principle. He never gave all of himself. He didn't flood the king with ideas. He gave one precise answer, one solution that only he could deliver. The more you hold back, the more they fear losing you. And fear breeds loyalty. This is hard, especially if you're generous by nature. But if you give away everything you know, you become a stepping stone. You become the teacher they outgrow, the mentor they leave behind. To preserve power, you must curate your wisdom. Share enough that they thrive, but only through you, not without you. Let them grow strong, but keep the roots of that strength tied to your presence. As the saying goes, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll open a rival shop across the street. Teach half the technique. Keep the secret spice. This is Loki's law. When all roads lead to you, even the dangerous ones, your enemies must tolerate you, even as they sharpen their knives. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be clean. You just need to be necessary. Let others fight. Let others burn bridges. You, meanwhile, become the bridge itself. When conflict arises, you offer peace. When confusion spreads, you offer clarity. When disaster looms, you offer the hidden exit. And when all is calm again, they'll remember who saved them and who they can't do without. This is an advanced form of power. People don't just need solutions, they need stories. Versions of reality that make them feel safe, smart, powerful, loved. So become the character they depend on. To one person, you're the guide. To another, the partner. To another still, the mirror. Don't force them to see the real you. Let them see the useful you. And in doing so, you become not just a person, but a role in their inner mythology. They won't want to lose that, because losing you would mean losing a part of how they see themselves. When your value has been established, when they rely on your presence without even realizing it. Step back. Don't explain. Don't announce. Just vanish. And watch who comes looking. Watch who falters. Watch who suddenly finds their world slightly dimmer, slightly harder to bear. That is your power. Not in words, not in noise, but in absence. When you can disappear and still control the room, you have learned this law to its fullest. They don't have to love you. They just have to realize when you're gone, everything feels worse.